Good morning everyone, good afternoon or good evening, and welcome back to Lilly Code. Today is day 15 of 100 days of code, and today we're going to be starting off with a new project. We've reached a new section in our course that we're following, the React Complete tutorial by Maximilian Schwarzmüller. And yes, he's starting a new project, so I'm going to come back to the bar chart component that we've made so far, which you can see here, where we were adding expenses and tracking expenses. But considering Max has moved on to a new section, I'm going to just come back to this. I'm eager to have a look at something new myself. So we will come back to the bar chart component and perfect that later. But yeah, for the time being, I'm going to just continue on. So the first thing we're going to do is open up the project folder where Max has this new code and get it set up and run this new project and follow along with what it is that he's going to go over. So we'll be recapping on all of the concepts that we've learned so far in the course, so stay tuned for that. So let's get going. So we're on chapter 6 here, so I need to open up chapter 6. So in order to get to chapter 6, I will just open up my files here. I have, where on earth did I put this? So where did I put this? So documents. Okay, so here we go. Here's the main project that came with the course that we are following along with, and we're on chapter 6. So I'm going to unzip this file, just where we are, and from there, once we have that unzipped, I'm going to open it up in code. So open with code. Yes, I trust the authors. Sorry, itchy ear. I trust the authors. And what's going on, mate? Right, so there's nothing in that folder. Chapter 6, styling. Yeah. So let's 7 something completely different. Just check out chapter 7. Okay, so I'm going to just keep looking for a moment. Okay. So I think we're on to something here. I've unzipped one of the other folders. That was a chapter 6 folder, and I seem to have the content that we need. So what we're looking at is this. Okay. Cool. So yes, this is indeed where we need to be. Starting the project. So that's perfect. Okay, cool. So in app.js, yep, this is what we're expecting to see. Cool. So we'll keep going here. So the first step that we need to do in order to get this running is install our packages, because he hasn't pushed up the packages, the node modules, because it just unnecessarily bloats the project. So therefore we're going to run that now ourselves. That's annoying. There we go. Okay, so we're going to run that ourselves first of all. So if I just open up my terminal here and we go into the correct files, so this is the folder we're in, that's all good. And then we'll just do a dir to see what's in this folder. So we have another folder of the same name, so we'll cd in there. And then I'll do dir again to show me what's in this current folder. And we have code, git ignore, and selecting a branch. So we're going to go into code, because I presume this is where we should be. We'll do a dir again. Yes, and now we're into our various folders here. So we're going to go into the first folder, starting a project, so cd01. And then we can run npm install to install all the packages that we need in here. So we'll just let that run. Okay. Cool. Okay, so we're just waiting for our node modules to install here, waiting for npm install to finish what it's doing, and then we'll have our node modules folder and we can run npm start. So that's what we're looking at now. I presume there might be a few errors after running this, because I found that before with following along with course material. Maybe not in this case, but sometimes when you run the npm install, some things may have since been depreciated and you have to do a little bit of messing around in order to get the project to run, which if you're someone who's brand new to this and you're just coming in and you haven't really figured those things out yet, it can be a little bit confusing and off-putting when the course content that you get and when you follow the steps that the instructor has said. I'm not saying that this is going to happen with this particular course, and all of Max's courses have always been great, but it has happened to me with other instructors and other courses in the past. So if that does happen, that this doesn't just run straight away, it'll be a great exercise for us to go through how I would solve that, because you know, it's only through learning and practice that you figure these things out. So been there, done that, had my head wrecked, and now have a better idea of how to fix these issues now. So we'll have a look when this is ready and how we're set and whether or not we can just run the project. So that's what we're going to do. Yeah. So I'm wondering whether to pause this while I'm waiting for it to load and just restart. Or I'm trying to think, is there any pearls of wisdom I can give you guys? So one thing I'm just thinking of there now is that we're already on day 15. You know, the time is flying on by. When you just make a commitment like this and you just do it every day, you'll be surprised that the days roll on by. I remember the first time I did it, the days seemed to go like quite slow. And then all of a sudden I was on day 60 and then I was nearly finished, and it's just great. Like already I've been getting so much support on Twitter. So, you know, everyone helps each other and they reach out and say, oh, good work, you know, keep it going. Or so it's a really great community. So you will be encouraged to stick with your original dedication of doing the hour a day coding. And yeah, I highly recommend it. So I do recommend you check it out. And yeah, I'm going to pause the video now and come back to you when it's loaded. So catch you then. Okay, great. So we are back. We are finished. That has successfully created our node modules folder here. So here we can see all of the packages that we're using in this project, and they've all been installed now by running npm installed. So that's super. We have our folder there. So now I'm just going to try npm start and see what happens. Let's check it out. Oh, cool. Great. So that just started there. Sometimes you might get an error, and if you just read it and see what it's saying. So some of the errors you might be likely to see is this particular package. Let's say it'll be something in this folder. It might say Babel is now depreciated. You need to have a version in between this and this. So then you can just Google that particular error, see what version is needed and install that version. So you'll find information on how to do these things if you get an error, but generally that's what it is. So say for example one of these packages had since been outdated and we just need to roll it up or reinstall a new one, and you can do all that through npm. So if I just go to npm and show you here, so here we go. I've just googled npm babel if for example that was one of the packages that was older, and then you can go into npm here and see what's going on. And if you google the exact error, these will be the instructions you get. So there you have how to install it. So you can just go ahead and run this in your terminal, and here are all the versions. So if it says you need a particular version, you can install a particular version as well. And the way you install a particular version is you just append the version on at the end. So again, if you get stuck on something like this and you Google the error that's come back and you've got stuck at, then you can figure out what it is you need to fix it. But luckily we didn't get any errors this time. So let's get stuck into the course and see what Max is saying. So here we can see we have a new project that we're looking at. It's just a simple tracker, and we can add in a course goal. So a course goal might be, you know, do section 1, and there we go. So that adds it into the list, and if we do section 1, there we go, and by clicking it you can delete it. So that's the functionality that's happening here, and we're going to add and expand and make this better. So that's what we're about to do, and I'm just going to have a listen to Max here and see what he's saying so we can get on with this. Cool. So it looks like from reading the outline of what's coming that we're going to start looking at a lot of dynamic stuff. So how to set styles dynamically, which means like you might have one particular style if a button isn't clicked, and then if someone clicks a button you want to change the text to red or to highlight it. So these are really useful, and that's what we're going to be focusing on now. So first of all we're going to be looking at setting dynamic. First we're going to be looking at setting dynamic inline styles. So let's see what's going on. So I'm just going to watch the video, code and explain as I've been doing. Okay. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is prevent people entering empty goals. So at the moment, if we take out the text, we can still add in an empty goal. So the first thing we're going to do is to prevent this from happening. So let's do that. So here in our form submit handler, this is where we are doing the actions that are happening when we submit this particular form. So, which we can see down here. So we have our form, and then we have our on submit, which is running this function when we submit it. And then you can see our button just with the type submit, which when this button is clicked, this tells it this is the submit. And once you have this connected on submit on the form, it runs this method then. So if we click this method, it brings us back to our form submit handler. that I was just showing you. And now we're going to handle those empty spaces. So we can add an if block in here, and we just put in the if block entered value, because we can see that's what we've called the value that we enter in, entered value. And then we just want to trim this. So that means check for white space. So if it's white space, just take it out. So dot length is definitely 0. So what this is saying is, if the entered value dot trim, so take away all the space, is equal to 0, or if there's no characters entered, or if we have trimmed away empty characters and there's nothing else left, so there's nothing entered basically, then we want to just return. So this will stop that behavior happening now. And if we save and go back and try and add in a goal, we can no longer add in a goal. But we're also not giving the user any sort of a warning. You need to put in some text. So we're going to provide a warning now, just so that's a bit more apparent for the user as to why they can't enter this goal. So we're going to highlight things in red if something is empty, in order to tell the user what's going on. So we're going to use useState to do this, and it's either true or false. So we're going to set it as true first of all. And we'll just call this is valid. And then we'll have our method in order to set this value, and this will be set is valid, which is the method we use to update the is valid boolean, which is initially set to true, because that's what we've set it out here as. So then once we go into our submit form handler, what we can do is use this boolean. Yeah, so if we've come in here and we've seen that there's no value entered, well then that means that the value is not valid, and we can set is valid to false in order to be able to then use this boolean to do something with in a moment. So what we're doing here is we are dynamically going to change the color depending on whether this boolean is set or not. So the way that this is valid boolean is being switched on and off is when we come into this loop, it starts off as true. And if we come into this loop and we have not entered a value, or it's empty, so we've just entered a load of empty spaces, and then we add the goal, there we can see this is telling us that this is not valid, and the text is therefore changed to red. So we're giving some sort of an indication already to the user, and we're going to continue on with this and expand this even further. So here we can see we have our label, and we're using the style property, and this takes an object, which is why we have declared it like this. So we've passed in this object, and what we're saying is we want to change the color if it is not valid to red, otherwise make it black. So if we type in another course goal here and say start course and add that, should go back to black, because now the is valid boolean should be set to true. So we'll have to have a look at that, but that's what should be happening there. Okay, so we're also going to do this for the input as well, and seeing as we have this boolean and we're already doing it, we can just actually copy and paste this same code because we're doing the same thing here. So if I just copy and paste this style, we want it to be red if it's invalid and black otherwise, and this might have to be border color because the input itself isn't text, you know. Oh, there we have our text in there is red. So let's just see what happens if we do this. I'll reload my page and I'll type in "this is a goal" and add the goal, and then I'll try and do just some empty spaces. So it hasn't actually changed the border, obviously, because color is a CSS property that links up to text. Color is the CSS property to control the color of your text. So that's why that hasn't changed the color of the box, but perhaps we could make the border color red instead. So in order to do this, we just have to set the border property. So border color, I'm just googling this because I can't remember. So yeah, border color, we just use border color. So when we're using React and we're using styles in React, we do not use the dashed version like this. We instead use camel case. You can see there that's given an error. So you use the camel case version like this instead. And this should now work for us. So if I just add in my semicolon and save. If we try and add an empty goal, well, it didn't make the border red. Okay, so it didn't make the border red just yet, but let's figure out. Oh, I spelled border wrong, didn't I? Yeah, I'm always doing that. Yeah. So sometimes it can be such simple things. Check your spelling. Basically, I spelled border wrong. So if I save that now we can see if it's empty, the border itself is highlighting red. So it's just a good indication that something is wrong here. And then if we say new goal and we add this, I would like to see these colors resetting. So we do need to just implement the reset of this, that once we do put in something valid, that red color gets dropped. So we're going to take care of that. So we're just going to add a background colour in as well, just to really make this pop, to show that there's something wrong. So you can chain along your styles the way I'm doing here, just with a comma, when you're passing it in this style object in React. So we're going to use the same boolean that we've been using because this is just telling us whether or not there's something filled in. So that's perfect. And we'll make it salmon because red might be a bit too red. And then we can also pass in transparent, just so it's not completely transparent, just so it's not completely colored in red, like really obvious. So now we're getting somewhere. So this is very obvious that something is wrong, and let's continue on. Oh yeah, no, this is just totally salmon actually, and the transparent is the alternative. So if something isn't wrong, it'll just be clear. So sorry, I'm confused what was going on there. That's what's happening. This is a ternary statement, which is saying if this is true, if is valid, if it is not valid, because this is the not. So putting this before a particular variable means it is not. So this is saying is valid. Is valid is our boolean. It's originally set to true. And by putting this exclamation mark, we're saying it's not. So if this is not valid, if that turns out to be true, make the background salmon, make the background color salmon. Else, if this statement does not equate to true, aka if not valid. If it's not valid, salmon is what we're going to do. If it is valid, the alternative of this, then do what's after the semicolon, which is transparent. So that's what's happening there. So it'll just switch it off actually. Okay, so I actually don't want that to be grey, I want that to be black, but I would like the border to be that grey colour, because that's the colour of our border here. We can see in our form control input, our border was originally this grey colour. So rather than going back to black, if indeed the input is correct, we'll just go back to our original grey colour that we have on the outside of the box. So now if I reload, we have that grey colour. If I add in something, there we go, great. Okay. Okay. So what we're going to do now is work on resetting the form in the case that it is valid. So we don't have that happening yet. So this goal input change handler, we can see that that's being run here on change. So when we enter something into this box, in our input, we have, I'll just bring this down so you can see this a bit better. So we have our input declared here. Here's our conditional styling dependent on whether or not we have a valid entry. And then we're running this on change function every time that we enter something into the input. So that's running here, and this is the function that's being called. So in here, when we are doing a new key press or we're changing something, we can check in here, is there a valid entry? Have we got some text? And if so, don't put on the red border, which will keep the red border there only in the instance that there is nothing entered, and it'll take it off as soon as we've put something in. So that's switching on and off this feature. So that's what we're going to do now. So we'll just add another if block, and we want to get the event.target.value, which is basically just the text that's coming in. And we're going to run the trim on this again. So we just do .trim to check, is there something in there? Take away all the white space. Do we have some letters left? And if so, then we want to set our boolean back to true to say it is valid. So we'll just open up our curly brackets here like you would for any if statement. You have your if, the condition that you want to test in your if, and then you have the code that you want to run if this is true. So if we do have some text, if the length is greater than 0, if there's something coming in through that key presses when we press the buttons, press the keyboard, excuse me, and we're capturing this, so our event.target.value is going to tell us what those key presses are. And once we trim it and make sure that all the white space is taken out, do we still have letters? Is the length greater than 0? And if so, we're just going to set this boolean back to true, which makes perfect sense. So now this will switch on and off that functionality for us. So let's check that out. I'll just reload my page, and I will leave this empty first. And we can't add a goal. our box goes bright red and so does our text, so that's great. And now we'll just add in a course goal. This is a new goal, and all of the styling should go away now and allow us to enter that. So our styling has not gone away, so let's see why that is. So set is valid should be true, and what we're doing, if it is true, we should be making the background transparent. We should be making our border back to the grey. And it looks like our text did change back to black. So why this isn't working, transparent, I didn't spell transparent correctly. So through a process of elimination there, I could see that half of it worked. So our course goal text did go from red to black, but our box didn't go back to being transparent. So this was indicating that my function was working. That boolean or variable was being set back to true. The content was valid because the boolean worked for the course goal section. So that shows that the boolean did get set. Something did happen, but for some reason the transparent background didn't come back. So this helped me hone in as to where to look, as opposed to just going all over the place. I could see that the boolean must have been set because something triggered, and then I just noticed that I spelled transparent wrong. So that was a really simple fix, and sometimes it's as simple as that, guys, and times when it's not, persevere, and you often find that it does end up being something really simple in the end. So, and in the beginning that's not the case. Everything is double Dutch, everything is really confusing. So just keep practicing, and soon things start to come out of the woodwork. You start to be able to see between the fog, and you start to be able to figure these things out easier. So persistence is key. So let's continue. Okay, so now we're going to look at an alternative of inline styles. So these inline styles here, these come at the top level priority. They're the most important CSS in the file. As if you were to add an important, the question mark and important, that it sort of comes at the top of the cascade. It's, or at the bottom, I should say. So it starts at the top, and as it cascades down, this puts it at the bottom of the list. So therefore the highest priority. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, so your inline styles are a very high priority. So we can remove them from this level and do it in a slightly different way. So that's what we're going to explore now. Okay, so another way to do this will be to give our div, this div here that's wrapping our form, wrapping the label and wrapping the input, to give this some sort of a boolean or a value here. And then if that value is indeed switched on, then we can assign styles that are coming in from our CSS, our linked CSS file. So that's another way to do this. So perhaps if the name here given was invalid, so if invalid was true, then we want to apply the invalid styles. And the way we could do that is then do .form control, because we can see here that that is the name of this CSS class. So if that's true, and then also if we do the dot and do invalid, this means on the same level. So once these two things are true, then we want to apply these styles, and we could add in a border color here of red and apply it this way. So we'll have a look at doing it this way. Okay. So the way we're doing it now is by adding classes dynamically. Okay. So we're going to add another class here, form control, CSS class, dot invalid, and on the label, and we'll just make it red, the text. So there we go. So yeah, so this was the way to do it with dynamic CSS classes. So what I'll actually just do is commit these changes. So in my Git history, when I go back through my project, if say I can't remember how to add a dynamic CSS style, I have that commit there and I can always look back at this piece of code. So I'll do that before we remove this and move on to our next way of implementing this dynamic styling through classes instead. So here I'll just do a git add everything. I just remembered I do not have a Git repository set up for this new section of the course. So let's do that together, because why not? That's what we're here, doing stuff together. So thanks guys. No, cool. So let's have a look. So if I just go to new repository here, and I'm just going to create my new repository. So I'll just say Max chapter 6 React styling, and I'm just creating this off to the left here, and I'll show you now in a moment what's going on. So now I've literally just went to new, selected new, and set up a new repository in my GitHub. If you are unsure about how to set up Git and a GitHub account, I have a video where I went through how to set up your entire development area when you want to start coding and you need to use a code editor and you need to save your code to Git, and you want to maybe do an Angular project, so you need to install Node. I did a full run through of how to do all of that, because these are the tricky things when you start coding. So from that now we have our Git repository that we can push into. So in order to push into this particular project, what we need to do is first of all initialize Git, because we can see here the error that came back was Git is not a repository. So we don't have Git tracking any of these files, which is why it's come back with that error. So if I just do git init, that's going to initialize our Git repository for us. And now I can git add everything. So just add all these files. Then we can do our first commit. Dun, 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 dun. When it's finished doing what it's doing. So then we can do our git commit, our first commit. So I'll just say git commit with a message, so just the M flag, and then we pass in our message in single or double quotes, it doesn't matter. So if you could find your double quotes, that would be super helpful. So now I'm just going to say started chapter 6 React, and say dynamic CSS classes in React. So that's perfect, and we just end with a double. So if you started with a single, end with a single. If you started with a double, end with a double, and we can just hit enter. So I thought I added everything, so let's just try. Well, I did. Yeah, that's okay. So now I'll just do git push. So it's just telling me, oh yeah, so now we don't do git push. Then we do git branch and main, which is just to create a main branch. We want to tell it create a main branch. And then we do git remote add origin, so you link it up to the git that you've created remotely on GitHub. So this particular git repository that we've just created, we need to point it there. So this is just when you're starting off your Git, you follow these instructions rather than commit rather than add, commit and push. There's just an extra step or two just to link it up to the repository that we've created online. And now we can push to the main. So this is telling me it has some errors. Source ref spec main does not match any. So let's just do a git status and see what's gone wrong here. So no commit. So it seems like, yeah, it didn't actually add any of our folders when we did the git add everything. But that's strange. So I'm just going to do, because it looked like it was adding everything in. So rather than doing git add dot, you can also do git add dash and capital A to add everything. So we'll try that. Then I'll do a git status and we should see that these files have changed green so that they've been added. Okay, so it doesn't like this because the file name is too long. So that's what's been going on. So that's okay. So what I'm actually going to do is open up this file in our file explorer. Here's our React starting project. I'm going to rename this to Max Chapter 6 Styling, because that's what the chapter is about. And I'll actually just add in some underscores because that's a bit hard to read, but that's okay for me there now. So now I need to close my Visual Studio Code so I can actually rename this. I'll just close everything for the moment, and now I should be able to rename that. So that's been renamed, the folder that we were currently working on. And if I go in here, now we can see that none of these names are particularly long. That should be okay. So it shouldn't give us that same error. So if I go back to our main project folder here and just open this with code, we'll open it back up in our code editor. And now I should be able to do the few bits that I was just trying to do there. So we'll have another look. There we go. And we'll open up our terminal, new terminal. So we're within the folder we need to be in. So I'll just do a git add everything again. Let's see what happens. Fatal. File name too long. Where's that long file name coming from? Adding files failed. Unable to index file. Node modules. Oh. Right, so let's just go up here and have a look at what all these are saying. Okay, so I don't know what this is about, so I'm going to just search for this particular error and try and see if we can get a bit of guidance as to why Git won't add these files for me. So it also seems that the message about the file name being too long has cropped back up, so we'll get to that. But first of all, I will just Google this error and see what comes up. So what is that? Yeah, someone tell me, share your knowledge with me. So when I create a new Rails application, I'm seeing a warning. I do git init and git add, then boom, this pops up for almost all files. What's the difference between LF and CRF? Should I be concerned about it? So okay, in Unix systems, the end of a line is represented with a line feed. In Windows, it's represented with a carriage return and a line feed, thus CRLF. Cool. When you get code from Git that was uploaded from a Unix system, there we go. Max uses a Mac and I'm on a Windows. So this is just some standard things, and this is how you solve bugs. You just go ahead and you Google and try and read it properly. That would be my advice. I always sort of used to traditionally fire into trying the first thing I found, and then you get yourself into a bit of a tizzy, and because you might have tried something that only half solves your solution, so then it doesn't solve your solution and you're still confused, and then you're running around looking for another solution. So just try and take it a bit slow. This is making sense. Basically, when you're creating a new line, it's done different in a Linux or a Windows system. So that's all that's going on here, or Unix, sorry, which I presume is Mac and Linux run on Unix, if I'm not mistaken, but hey ho, don't quote me on that one. But that's what I'm getting. So basically, the way that a Mac and a Windows register this carriage return, register the end of a new line, is done differently, and that's throwing out errors. So that's all it is. So it says we can just run this. If you're a single developer working on his Windows machine, and I don't care that Git automatically replaces LFs to CRLFs, which I do not care, then we can just run this. So let's run this and see if that is going to fix it. And then he's also provided some more documentation. So there we go. If you're programming on Windows and are working with people who are not, then this is the error you might run into, because Windows uses a carriage return, whereas Mac and Linux use only the linfeed character. So do quote me on that one because I was right. So but it was a guess, an educated guess. So we'll move on. Now you know that you can quote me, and let's just run this command. I'm only messing. So we'll run this command that we have copied, didn't correctly copy, so we'll just copy it again. We'll paste it in here. There we go. So that's run now, and that's basically telling my particular machine to just change everything to this CRLF format instead for us. So now if we do a git add dot, we might be a little bit closer to where we want to go. So we've still failed adding the files. It was unable to index this particular file, fail adding files. The file will have its own line endings, that's okay. We've said that that's okay. LF will be replaced by CRLF, that's also okay. So and then fatal. So let's just follow this. It's not bringing us there. Unable to index this file. File name too long. Okay, so yes, we're back to the file name too long error. So let's solve this one now, and all I think we'll have to do is rename the files, but no harm having a little search and seeing what Stack Overflow says. So I've copied and pasted this whole line because this is the error we're getting. But one thing you learn from looking for errors after a certain amount of time is this probably won't bring us back the best results. So this particular part here in the quotes, this is specific to my machine, it's specific to my project. This is the exact file name that was too long for us to add. So we're better off just taking that out, because everybody's file name will be different, and it'll just help our search a little bit if we don't have this big long thing in there. So I'll just take that out, and I might actually just leave the .bin, so maybe that part is relevant. So let's search for this. Git checkout fail with file name too long. Okay, perfect. And I'll go to Stack Overflow as opposed to Confluence and see what's going on here. Surely I'm doing something wrong. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. I'm using Git for Windows. I know this release should fix this issue, but not for me. I did get git config core long paths true and git add dot and then git commit. But now when I do a git status, there's a load of files with file name too long. So let's see what the answer is. Git has a limit of 4096 characters for a file name, except on Windows. It uses an older version, and there is another limit. This is a limitation of your Windows machine and not of Git. You can read the details here. You can circumnavigate this by using another Git client or setting core long paths to true, as explained in other answers. So let's just give this a whirl. Basically, we're just configuring our Git in order to allow us to store long paths now in our file name. So we'll try that, and we'll do git add again and see what happens. So these are some of the errors I was talking about that can happen. So why am I not starting from in this folder? Why is it coming from all the way over here? Because this isn't where I wanted to set up my Git. And this would remove all these files if we were just going from this folder. So let's just see what's going on there. So our React, so we have a git ignore here. Okay, so we've already initialized a Git project, or else this is coming from Mac. So I'm going to delete this other Git because we don't actually want that there, right? We want one Git folder per project in this instance. Sometimes you may have separate Git folders, which is storing all your Git information at different levels, but for us we just want one central point where this is going to store this. So now if we go in here and we go into code, we have our max chapter 6 styling, and I'm going to just cut this folder all together out of here, get it out of there, and I'll paste it into just my sites actually. So we'll paste it in here, paste, and can't move it because I have it open. So now it's been moved. So now if we open this and just check what's going on, okay, so we don't have a Git folder in here yet. So let's try that again now. So now from our sites, I'm going to open this with code. I've deleted the Git folder. I initialized it too far up in the project. So what we're going to do is git init again. So we'll open our terminal, new terminal. First we'll just do git commit and just check what it says to make sure. So Git is not a repository, cool. So we'll do git init to initialize Git. We'll do git add everything, and hopefully now that I've made the Git folder within the correct folder, we don't need it up at the higher levels where the folder name was really long and that was contributing to our file name too long error. So I just rearranged the folders. I could have renamed that folder, but I just decided to take the folder that we actually need, so it's not coming from so high, so we're not having to traverse through so many folders, and therefore the file names will be shorter because we've cut out all that beginning part of the segment that it was going to. So now we'll just add everything. Let's see how this goes. This is looking good. Okay, great guys, so this is working. We can see our files are being added here and it's still going. So we got a lot of files in the house. We're adding them like a little old mouse. No, that was no mice were harmed in the making of this. Follow along. So let's just keep on going here. I get excited. Why not have a song? Do you know what I mean? Life's too short. Sing something. I sure enjoy it anyway. That's if you enjoy it, you know. So now now we're just going to do our other commands that we have to run. So let's go back to where we have our, this is what I'm looking for. So this is telling us all the different things we need to run. So we've initialized our Git repository now. That's great. We have added everything. So now we'll do our commit. I don't want the message to be first commit because actually this needs to be a little bit more descriptive. So I'm going to pass in the message flag, open it with a single quote and say chapter 6, max react, dynamic styles. Dynamic styles with styles prop. So let's just, and I might just actually add in like a little description. So that's styles. Like it's however you want to do this so you'll remember it yourself. So this is how we pass in the styles. We pass in a style object. So that'll just remind me, okay, great. If I need to revisit this, well, my message is nice and descriptive and I can see what's going on there. So let's see what happens. So, oh, my back cracked. Great. So that's doing something there. It's pushing it up. Or it's committing it, I should say. We're committing at the moment. Great. So that's looking successful. And then I'll just do a git status to show you. So git status, you can run git status at any stage to show you the status of git. So that's helpful. So I'll run that just to show you what's happening. There we go. We're committing everything. Oh, we're even committing our node modules. So we'll just do git status. And we're on branch master. There's nothing to commit, so that's grand. So I want to branch, make a branch main off the master. So let's do that rather than being on the current branch we're on. So we're just going to make a main branch here. Perfect. And then we want to add our remote origin, which is just the URL, connecting it up to the Git that's on the internet, the URL of that particular repository. So we can see that there. If you click that, that will actually bring you to the repository. So we're just linking those two together, and then we can push up to the origin, up to the remote, up to Git, the website, and on this branch main that we've created. So let's do that. There we go. Perfecto selecto. Cool. So now if we do a git status, we should see our branch is clean and there's nothing to commit. So that's been successful. And you can also do a git log to show you the log of what Git has recently done. So here we can see we have our commit. This is the commit message. This is how you can roll back. So say if something went terribly wrong now in the next half an hour and everything broke and I couldn't figure it out, but I knew at this moment in time in my Git log when I committed and I have chapter 6 max react, and if I had an error or something, I would specify that in the commit message and try and rectify an error before I commit. But say if I got to a particular place and I solved a few errors and I still had other errors, I'd say git commit, got to this particular point, have this error. So my commit message will tell me if I've stopped at a place with an error, and generally commit when your code is in working condition. So then if something was to go wrong, you can always just do git checkout and check out that particular commit and go straight back to this exact moment in time and continue on working. So that's why Git is so wonderful. As a solo contributor, you can roll back when things are going wrong. And then it's even more powerful when you're working on a team, because people can be working on the same code base, on the same repository, and you can commit and push and pull and work together on that same code base. So that's how it's done in a professional setting. Everybody is using the same repository and it's tracking all of those changes. So very useful piece of software, and very pertinent skill in the coding industry is to know how to use Git. I don't even know what the alternatives are if you weren't to use Git. Like, I think you have to know how to use Git if you want to be a coder, and certainly you should know about it. So there still needs to be a Git tutorial on the way, and that will come, because you guys, this is just a essential part of tech and coding, in my opinion, or from what I've seen so far. So anyway, let's continue. We have that done. That's super duper. So we'll just keep going on here now. So that's great. We have our project running. We've committed that bit of code, and now we can go and start looking at unknown word. Now we can start looking at continuing on doing these styles in a different way. So let's look at that now. I do not need my known modules folder. I need my source, my course goals, and course input is what we were looking at. So let's open them up. Let's get our project running here. So I'll just check where I'm at. I'm in the root here, so I have my public and my source folder, so I can do npm start. So if you don't run any of these commands if you run these commands, I should say, from an incorrect folder, you'll get errors. And it's easy sometimes to not realize you're in the wrong folder. So if things aren't running, just make sure you're in the correct folder first. That's often caught me out, so it's good to know. You will get an error specifying that, but you might just be like, what's going on? And act a bit impulsively. I know that's what happens to me sometimes. So here we have our input. I don't know why we're seeing two inputs here now. So we have our label, and we should have one input, not two, so that's weird. But let's just see what Max is going to say now. I don't know why that's happening. So I'll just wrap my text here so we can have a look. So we just have our style. So yes, we're going to do this differently. So we can take this out now. That was just one particular way to dynamically change the style. So we'll start by taking that out. It's so strange. So, and I'm just going to move these up, which should make absolutely no difference, but oh shoot, okay, I understand. So we didn't